review and to answer or provide information with regards to those questions at the next information session. So all of the information that's provided at these sessions will also be posted online. As will any of the other information that we provide tonight will also be posted so that anybody can access it if they weren't able to attend tonight. So after the second information session where this information will be presented, the survey will be open for 12 days to provide your input on the preferred option. The results of the survey, again, will help trustees and help inform them to make a final decision with regards to the future of Sherwood in March 2020. So when I talk about 10 years, I'm referring to the fact that the board approved the motion that kept Sherwood open in May 2012. So since that time, and in 2016, the board developed a capital plan that included secondary facility benchmarks where all secondary schools receive upgrades to their science labs, their learning commons, gymnasium floors, and sports fields. So this work was intended to be completed at Sherwood as well, but we did do a feasibility study and it was determined that it was not possible, that the work needed to be completed when the building was empty and that we could not complete it in the short time over the summer because of mostly related to the asbestos abatement that needed to take place in order to perform the work. So since that work has been completed in all of our other secondary schools, the board is looking at the next phase of our secondary facility benchmarks, and that includes things like washrooms, cafeterias, corridors, and entrances. So again, we were not able to complete the work related to the science labs, learning commons, or sports fields at Sherwood. And we will fall possibly further behind if we were not able to complete some of the benchmark work in the next phase, which would include the washrooms, quarters, and entrances. So what we wanted to do is to just show you some examples of some of the benchmarks that have been completed at other schools. So you see on this slide the before and after with regards to one of our schools, Westdale. And the smaller picture is a before picture of the science labs, and the larger picture is an after picture. And on the next slide, you'll see similarly the learning commons. So we were able to complete, again, this benchmark work in all of our schools. So as we complete that work, we want to let you know that we will be performing this work for the Sherwood community under either option 2 or 3 that will be discussed further in the presentation. So we are not able to complete it with number 1, status quo, but for options 2 and 3, this work will be completed for Sherwood students. So this benchmark work, as I mentioned, and also some other deferred renewal work that is related to the benchmark work, cannot be completed at Sherwood because we do need it completed when students or staff are not in the building, and the summer is not enough time for this work to happen. So as we initially, when it was determined in 2012 that Sherwood would remain open, we also knew that there were renewal needs that needed to be addressed. So between the renewal needs and the benchmark work that need to be addressed at Sherwood, we have requested funding from the ministry 8 times since 2013 to build a new school on the Sherwood site, and the board has not been successful. And in October 2020, trustees decided that it would be, to be fair to the community, that the board would try one more time for a new school, and if it was not successful, other options needed to be considered in order for those learning spaces to be addressed. So you may be wondering why this is happening now and why it seems to be having such a quick turnaround time. And really there are 2 reasons. One of them being that we did hear in December 2021 that we were not successful in this final try. And in addition, up until the 2020-21 school year, the Barton site was being used as a holding school for Nora Francis Henderson. So options 2 and 3 were not available. Whether the students are to remain at Sherwood, but we do need to perform the work at Sherwood, and so temporarily they would need to have a holding school, or whether the students of Sherwood would move locations permanently, and both those options were not available until that space was free. So those are the two reasons why you're seeing it come forward now. And the reason that we would like to make a decision in March, why we think it's important, is because then we can start the work right away as soon as students leave the building in June, and students and staff are out of the building, we can start the work right away. So that's why you're seeing it come forward, because of the timing is related to the results of the ministry request. And the reason that we want to have it completed by March is so that that work can start right away, so we can have our students in their appropriate spaces with the appropriate learning spaces as quick as possible. So if we look at the three options that I've been discussing, the first one is status quo. So that means the school remains on the current site and there will be no significant changes to the building. So we can do limited renewal work. We can ensure that the building is safe, but we will not be able to perform any of the benchmark work that we saw examples of for other schools. And in addition, we are not able to perform a significant amount of the renewal work that's being completed in other areas. The second option is to temporarily move the students to the Barton site in September 2020. And again, the reason for the timeline and the quick turnaround is so that we can start the work right away. They would perform the renewal work and the secondary benchmark work at the Sherwood site, and then the students would move back to a newly renovated Sherwood when that work is complete. And we're estimating the timelines to be between 18 to 24 months. And then the third option would be to perform the renewal and the secondary benchmark work at the Barton site, and then move the students permanently to this site when the work is complete. So there would be no changes to boundaries. There would be no changes to the students that would be attending. The staff would remain the same. It would just be determining which space the school would be in. So those are the three options, and we really want to look at all of the factors that should be considered when you're completing the survey and determining which option you think would be best for you, your family, or the community. So if we can look at the factors, this map provides the locations of the two sites. So for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to refer to them as Sherwood and Barton. Whichever decision is made, it will be Sherwood. And I just want to be clear, again, the same Sherwood staff, the same Sherwood students, a different location. So the locations are here. They are approximately 3 kilometers apart, and again, they are within the same catchment area. The next factor that we should consider is the capacity, and I apologize for the size of the maps, and these maps will be available online, and there'll be a floor plan for each floor. This was just to give a small example, but the Sherwood capacity, so how many students is the school built for, is 1374, and the Barton capacity is 1092. And our current enrollment is 1253. So many cases for secondary schools operating over 100% capacity, 110 to 120 is somewhat normal across the province, and the way that classrooms are loaded and lunches happen, that is fairly normal. But we do recognize that when the enrollment hits its peak of 1389, its projected peak in 5 years, it could be possible that portables would be required, or even that the board would be able to apply for a permanent addition at Barton if it was required. But again, in the scenario right now with the enrollment that it is and the capacity of the Barton site, that would not be required at this time. you can move to the next slide. Just want to also look at the site sizes. So the Sherwood site is 12.53 acres. The Barton site, and when we look at the Barton site, we're looking at within the dotted lines, is 10.05 acres. The Beasley property, which is directly behind Barton, is not fenced off, or the green space there is not fenced, so that would also possibly be able to be used if necessary. But again, we're looking at 12.5 acres versus 10 acres. Another factor that we think that should be considered is the walkability of each of those schools. So how many students live within walking distance from each site? So with the current enrollment at Sherwood, it is currently walkable for 639 of the 1,253 students. And the Barton site is currently walkable for 703 of the 1,253 students. So somewhat comparable, we would be looking at possibly be a reduction of 2 to 3 buses based on one site versus the other. Another factor that we consider and that we've been hearing a lot about are the programs that are included at Sherwood. So we do have French immersion. We do have a number of specialist high skills majors, including arts and culture, construction, health and wellness, and transportation. And we also have a cosmetology program that is running at Sherwood. And we just want to be clear that all of these programs will continue under option 2 or 3. So there is no intention to move any of these programs to a different location. And the spaces that are necessary for these programs will be provided at both locations. The next factor that we should consider in making the decision is the facility condition index. And it really represents our renewal needs over the replacement value. That means we would look at the total renewal needs of the building, and we would look at how much it would cost to build a new building. And so when we look at this, obviously the higher the percentage, the higher the cost to do those improvements. So as opposed to when you're at school, the higher percentage is not the best percentage. So it would cost more to perform the renewal work at the Sherwood site than it would cost to do the work at the Barton site. Or there is more work to do at Sherwood than there is to do at Barton. A next important consideration are the costs. So when we looked at our benchmark costs, we did recognize that the Sherwood benchmark costs would be approximately 50 to 60% higher than the average benchmark costs. And this was due to the asbestos abatement required. So we did have a third-party consultant come in and provide us with their expected cost to be able to do that science, the science labs, the learning commons, and any of the other work in the school for the benchmark work. And when we did that feasibility study, we not only did we find out that we weren't able to do it in the time that was required, so that the students had to be out of the building, but we also did find out that it would be approximately $9 million when we were looking at approximately $5 million for other schools. Sorry, approximately $4 million for other schools. So we do know that the costs were significantly higher. That being said, that $9 million was included in the budget with the intention of doing this work if it was possible. And again, the only way that it would be possible would be for the students and staff to be out of the building for approximately 18 to 24 months. So combined with the renewal work, in addition to the benchmark work that we're looking at moving forward, we estimate that the cost is going to be approximately $15 million to do the benchmark and the renewal work at Sherwood to bring Sherwood up to the standard that we see in our other HWDSB schools. And then with regards to the Barton site, we do know that the cost there would be approximately the same as our other schools, or about the average benchmark cost. And the cost, again, for the benchmark work and any of the renewal work that we know would happen at the same time is approximately $8 million. So for the same work in the two different sites, we're looking at a $15 million cost versus an $8 million cost. Just for your understanding of those costs, we do receive annually approximately $8 million in school renewal grant that is meant to assist with the renewal needs of all of the schools across the entire board. So we have approximately just under 100 schools. We also receive approximately $20 million in school condition improvement. We refer to it as SCI. And SCI is meant to take care of larger needs like new roofs, for example, new HVAC systems, more than just the renewal grant is meant to assist with. So in total, the board receives about $28 million annually in order to address the renewal needs of all of the schools across the district. So you can imagine that, again, when we're looking at $15 or $8 million, that's a fairly significant portion of this annual amount. And in addition, the board does have proceeds of disposition. So when we sell a property that's surplus to the board, we are able to get and to keep the funding that we receive from that sale, and we can use that for any of the SCI projects. So the SCI, again, including larger renewal projects. So we do have a fairly significant amount of proceeds of disposition right now that we can be used. But again, that is a one-time source of funding. But we do feel that we would be able to use, between the proceeds of disposition and our annual grants, we would be able to cover those costs. But as you can tell, it would be a fairly significant portion of the board's amount that they have in order to do this work across all of the schools in the district. And so, again, I just want to summarize everything that we talked about. So completing most of the renewal work and the secondary facility benchmark work is not feasible at the current site. We cannot do it, and that is why we have not done it. There is no other reason why it has not been done other than we couldn't do it with staff and students in the building. The time period to be able to do that work, it couldn't be done over the summer. It just wasn't enough time, and therefore we could not do that work. And because it wasn't feasible at the current site, again, it leads to the other two options, which are temporarily moving the students off-site or moving students permanently to a different location. And in order to do that, that location had to be available. So again, I want to be very clear. The reason that this is coming forward is because, one, we didn't receive funding, we found out in December, and two, the site, the Barton site, is now empty. Before, it was a holding school for Nora Francis Henderson students. And so we are able to use it either as a temporary site for students or as a permanent site for students. I think that you see that there are many factors that need to be considered in deciding where the Sherwood Secondary School should be located. And I hope that you consider all of these factors. And if you have other factors, that is your opportunity to ask questions and bring them forward. That should be considered when deciding on your preferred option. And again, you will be surveyed on your preferred option, and those results will be one of the factors that's considered in determining the best accommodation option for the current and future students of Sherwood. So with regards to next steps, based on the information that was provided today, if it did not address any questions that you have or any concerns that you have the opportunity to submit questions about either the process or the options to the board through the info@hwdsb.on.ca email address. That is between today, so now, and February 20th. We will look at all of the questions. We will attempt to answer all of the questions. We may combine questions if they overlap, and we will theme them in an attempt to reduce duplication. We will provide the answers at the second virtual information session, and they will be published on the board's website, as well as the board will receive all of the input that's provided as part of the package that they will receive on March 10th for the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting. So again, please submit your questions. We will review them. We will answer them, maybe not the exact question. You may not see your exact question online, but it will be themed with other questions of similar nature. But the intent would be there to provide the information that you've requested. We will provide that at our next virtual information session, again, which is on February 22nd. And so we will provide answers to the questions that you've asked. Plus, again, we will post all of that information on the board's website. And then after that virtual information session, we will open up the survey to the community on the preferred options, and it will be very simple. Which option, 1, 2, or 3. And once we have that feedback from the community, we will compile that feedback, and we will bring it to trustees to help them decide on the best accommodation option for Sherwood students. And that would be in March 2022. The exact date of the meeting, the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting, is on March 10th. So again, I hope this information was valuable. I hope that it's taken into account when you're looking at answering the survey. I know that there still may be questions, and we will be happy to receive them and to provide answers on the 22nd. And on March 10th, that information, that meeting is a public meeting via Teams, and anybody will have the ability to be able to attend that meeting as well. Or sorry, the meeting is posted afterwards. I apologize. So that meeting is a public meeting. We have the meeting on March 10th. It's recorded, and then the session is available for everybody to listen to the next day. So again, I know this wasn't the entire hour, and I know people probably have questions that they would like to ask. So we please ask you to email those questions. And comments that you may have, you can also email those. We will take everything into account and bring that information back on the 22nd. And so with that, I would like to thank you for attending. We really appreciate your feedback. I think this is really, really important for the students of Sherwood to have those learning spaces available to them. As you saw with even just those couple of pictures, it's a big deal, and in order to do this and in order to progress, we do need to make this decision. So again, we appreciate your time, and thank you.